If you live with ADHD, as I do, then you probably suffer from a similar thing that I deal with as well. And that is being freaking exhausted all the time. And you might be wondering, like, why am I so tired? Like physically tired, mentally tired, emotionally tired all the time. Even when you get a good night's sleep, you might feel pretty bloody exhausted. And the reason is not that you're lazy or not that you're stupid or you're doing life wrong. It's that you're running a marathon in your brain that not only other people can't see, but very often you can't see it either. And because of that, you are going through life trying to adult and do the things that you see other people around you doing. Meanwhile, all you really want to do is just crawl back into bed and take a freaking nap. So if that is what you feel, then please stick around because I'm going to get into why you feel that way and what you should do about it in today's video. And if you're new here, of course, welcome. My name is Kara McGill. I am an ADHD coach and creator, and I am here for the busy, ambitious brains who are really tired from running this invisible marathon and just want to go back to bed. Until today, so let's get into it. So I'm going to address some of the brain drain fatigue that I see in my clients and I also experience myself. This is certainly not an exhaustive list, no pun intended. I'm sure there's other things that exhaust you, and the whole point of this video is not to commiserate around why we're all so tired, but rather show some awareness around what might be creating either mental, physical, or emotional exhaustion for you, and how you can look at your situation and your life a little bit differently so that you can make better choices that align with what you truly want in life. Because at the end of the day, one of the major reasons overarching all of our exhaustion is that we see everything, we can't filter or prioritize everything, so we just want to do everything. So you can imagine from that perspective, if that is how your brain is wired, you can almost see why we are naturally wired to be exhausted. But when we have clarity on what it is we want out of life, what our strengths are, what our needs are, where we want to go, the direction we want our life to go in, we can immediately pull back from that desire to want to do all the things all the time and start directing our energy in more meaningful ways. And it certainly doesn't stop there. I don't want to oversimplify this by saying just because, we have bright, shiny object syndrome that we're always going to be exhausted. But what we do need is to be at least aware of that so that we can start to filter through all of the ideas that our brain is constantly coming up with so that we're not chasing shiny objects every day in every direction and getting nowhere with them other than just being completely flat out exhausted. So that is, I think, the overarching reason that we have a tendency to feel so tired. But like I said, it goes deeper than that. And one of the big things that is directly related to what I just said is decision fatigue. Having so many options in life is in some cases what you might think of as a privilege, or having that optionality gives you internal power, but sometimes the opposite is also true. And there's a lot of studies that prove this. One that comes to mind is around consumer behaviors. And the premise of the study was whether or not more options for consumers would lead them to take action and buy or not. So they created this fake brand of jams. And they went into grocery stores to do sampling. And in one situation, they would sample 3 different jams and see if somebody would buy an actual jam. And in other situations, they tested, 18 different options to see whether or not people would take action and buy jam. And the results of that study were super clear that in the situation when people were given way too many options, they didn't take action on the jams at all. But in the situation where people had fewer options, they were a lot more inclined to make a decision to actually purchase one of the jams. And that's just a small example of how decision fatigue impacts our life. And then when you think about all of the decisions that we have to make in a day, and I'm not even talking about the decision to have eggs or bacon or wear a black t-shirt or a white one. I'm talking about like looking at social media and everything that's going on in 2025 and deciding how we're going to feel about it, or who we're going to talk to about it, or whether we're going to say anything about it, or how we're going to change our behaviors because of it. There's just so much going on in our society right now, and we're taking in so much information, and we have to decide how we feel about that information before we actually even log any feelings about it and then process those feelings. So that just gives you a general idea of how vast decision fatigue is, how it impacts us on the regular, and how it can be literally exhausting whether you have ADHD or not. But then add to that all the wonderful things that go on in the ADHD brain, like rumination and overthinking things, going back to conversations or interactions you had yesterday, last week, or 10 years ago, and either berating yourself for not showing up the way you wanted to, or not saying the things that you really wanted to say, or the fact that you said way too much and you wished you had kept your mouth shut. Like all of those ruminations of stories gone past, personally, I find very exhausting, and I have a hard time getting out of those loops sometimes. And I also hear this a lot in my clients. Nothing can be more exhausting than replaying something that you actually have no ability to change. And then we have perfectionism and shame loops. Think about this. There's something you want to do, but because of executive function issues, you may not be able to task initiate or break something down or figure out the right point of entry. Like that in and of itself is an exhausting thing to have to think through in your head. But then add to that the layer of shame you probably have because you haven't started on the task yet, and you know a deadline is looming and you're going to disappoint someone. So the shame layers build on top of each other. And then there's the perfectionistic piece of I've tried and failed in the past, so I'm terrified to try again because I don't want to fail and I don't know what even good enough looks like because my brain isn't visualizing that, right? Like I don't have a clear idea of how to start something and what it'll look like when it's done. So instead, I just spin in the shame of not starting, and that again, it's so exhausting that it can take any of us down. And then beyond the procrastination, perfectionism, and shame loops, the one other thing that I find really exhausting is people pleasing and masking. And let me break those down. The people pleasing comes from everything that I just described, right? Like when you're ruminating on things that you wish you had done differently, or you're mired in fear because of perfectionism, no wonder that people pleasing tendency comes up so much because we've disappointed ourselves in the past. We've disappointed other people in the past. And as a result, we build this narrative in our brain that if we take action, we're going to disappoint. But if we don't take action, we're also going to disappoint. So you'll get stuck in this place where you can't possibly win in any different direction. And that not only leads to exhaustion, but it also leads to helplessness and depression if it goes unchecked. And then the masking piece, it's like the icing on the cake of everything that I just mentioned, right? Like when all of this stuff is going on beneath the surface, sometimes I'm not even aware that it's happening, but my subconscious knows that I need to put on a smiley face sometimes and just show up to do the adult thing. And I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing. Like sometimes we have to mask, but when that becomes the default or when we don't even know it's happening, then it makes it very hard to give yourself those deliberate opportunities to unmask, where you can just be yourself, decompress, and not have to worry about putting on a show for the people and places around you. So I know I have painted a pretty grim picture, but if there's any wonder as to why you might feel exhausted all the time, I hope that I have enlightened you to what might be going on beneath the surface, but not to stay there. Because the one thing I know to be true in my 4+ years now of coaching ADHD'ers is that awareness is the first step to transformation. And once you realize that these are the reasons why you feel so tired, then you can do something to change it. And let me say that I think there's a lot of different ways to approach this. It really depends on what comes up for you the most and what you deal with the most. For me, the people pleasing, masking, and rumination are probably the things that exhaust me the most. But I do believe that no matter how this is coming up for you, the most effective thing that I have found that helps and the most practical way to come at this is to not necessarily fix your external behaviors, but to go inward and really get clear on what is it that you want. If you can get clear on what's important to you, what your values are, what your personal needs are, then that will inform how you show up in the world. If I really want to address my people pleasing, then I need to know how I want to show up in my relationships and what's most important to me in terms of my relationships. What are my boundaries? What are my needs? And are the relationships that I have in my life currently working for me? And that is how I would think through whether or not I am showing up authentically and appropriately. Or in the case of rumination, I might ask myself, why do I keep coming back to this scenario that happened a long time ago and quite frankly, I can't do anything about? Is there an unmet need that makes me keep coming back to this? And it might be that there's a need to have a conversation with the person that was involved in the previous conversation, or it might be that you need to put distance between yourself and the situation you were in. But bottom line, if something keeps coming up and it's looping in your head, it's because there's an unmet need or a lack of resolution that you want to get curious about so that you can get clear on what's really going on, or what's the unmet need that you are responsible for addressing. Because at the end of the day, our unmet needs, once we're adults, are our responsibility to address. We may not always be able to resolve them, but it is our responsibility to understand what they are and make our best effort to get those needs met. And then the other piece of this is really understanding what your strengths are. I haven't talked about this in a while, but the VIA character strength is a tool that has come out of the positive psychology movement, if you will. And it's really an assessment of what your personal character strengths are. For example, mine are love of learning, hope, gratitude. I think it's humility, and I can't even remember all of them right now, but the ones that stick out to me is hope, gratitude, and love of learning. And whenever I feel myself getting into a shame spiral or I start overthinking something, I ground myself in what am I grateful for and what could this situation be teaching me? And that's not going to work for everyone, but if gratitude is one of your top strengths, then it's the thing that you're most inclined to lean on. And when you lean on it, it helps you find that clarity within. I can also apply my love of learning. Like, again, what can I learn from this situation? I might type it into ChatGPT and say, hey, this is a scenario that happened, and this is why I'm ruminating over it. And I think there's an unmet need here, but I'm not very clear on it. What can I learn about this situation and help myself get past the ruminating spin, because it's absolutely exhausting me. So those are some practical ways that I approach these layers of exhaustion. And I'm not going to tell you that it works 100% of the time and I still don't get exhausted, but I will say that having those tools at the ready are so helpful for helping me get out of them in the moment so that I'm less exhausted at the end of the day and I can think a little bit more objectively about the situations I get myself in. I will say ChatGPT is such a great tool for helping me figure these things out. And also, shameless plug for Vision to Action, which is a planner that includes assessments around strengths, values, and personal needs so that you can actually figure out what those are and then start planning them into your day so you start to live with more intention and less reactivity. Because a lot of what I've mentioned in terms of what makes us so exhausted is happening because we're reacting to life rather than having a clear intention of what we want out of life and how we want to show up and then acting accordingly. So the biggest takeaway I can give you if you're feeling exhausted all the time is to get clear on what you want, what your personal needs are, and your strengths, and really start to become aware of the things that your brain is dealing with below the surface that you can actually address. Maybe not all at once, but the more you take small action, the more momentum you're going to see and the less exhausted you're going to feel, and the more intentionally you can show up for your life so that you are going in the direction you want to go and you can cut the noise that's making you feel so damn tired all the time. So I hope you found this helpful. I hope I've given you some sort of an unlock, and please let me know what you're taking away from this and what you're going to start doing differently. Thanks for being here, guys. See you in the next episode. Bye for now.